The stars were dying. Zekthara knew it was all her fault. She floated in the observation chamber of the council station, her crystalline body catching the light from 1,000 distant suns. Each point of light represented a world filled with peaceful beings who had never known war, never known hunger, never known the terrible need to fight for survival. Now the Void Seekers were coming to destroy them all. The ancient machines had awakened after sleeping for millions of years. They moved through space like a plague, consuming entire star systems and leaving nothing behind but empty darkness. 12 worlds had already fallen. Beautiful crystal cities of Lumina were gone. The floating gardens of Serenes existed only in memory. The song forests of Melodia would never ring with music again. Zekthara pressed her delicate hands against the viewing wall and watched the emergency session below. Representatives from 1,000 species filled the great chamber, their voices creating a harmony of fear and confusion. None of them had answers. None of them knew how to fight something that could not be reasoned with or bargained with. "We need heroes," announced Harmonious Ninth, the council leader whose voice rang like crystal bells. "We must find beings of great courage and strength who can face this darkness." The word spread through the galaxy's communication networks. Every species searched their histories for tales of legendary warriors and noble champions. One spoke of beings made of pure light who had once defended their realm. The Cloud Dancers remembered stories of wind riders who could battle storms themselves. But these were only stories, myths passed down through generations of peace. It was young Velinara who discovered the transmission. She was monitoring deep space. Communications from her post on the water world of Serenus, when the signal reached her instruments, came from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, but the content made her tentacles quiver with excitement. The beings on this world called themselves humans, and their broadcasts told incredible stories. They spoke of warriors who ran into burning buildings to save others. They described healers who cut into living bodies to repair damage. They told tales of explorers who climbed the highest mountains and crossed the deepest oceans just to see what was there. Most amazing of all, they seemed to consider these things normal. Velinara sent the recordings to the council immediately. Within hours, every representative was listening to human transmissions with growing amazement. These creatures lived on a world that seemed designed to kill them, yet they thrived. They faced constant danger from weather, animals, disease, and each other, yet they had built a civilization that reached for the stars. "They call their world Earth," Velinara reported to the emergency session. "It appears to be what our scientists would classify as a Class 12 death world. Gravity is higher than most inhabited planets. The atmosphere contains poisonous gases. The surface is covered with predatory life forms and extreme weather patterns." The council chamber fell silent. No intelligent species had ever evolved on a Class 12 world. The conditions were too harsh, too dangerous. Life might develop there, but it would never become advanced enough for civilization. Yet the humans had not only survived, but prospered. Harmonious Night's crystalline form brightened with hope. "Send them our message. Quest their greatest heroes. To join our cause." Transmission took weeks to prepare. It had to be translated into human languages and encoded in a format their primitive technology could receive. The message was beautiful, filled with harmonious music and images of the galaxy's peaceful civilizations. It spoke of honor, courage, and the noble duty to protect the innocent. The signal reached Earth on a Tuesday morning and was detected by the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute in California. Dr. Robert Kim was drinking his morning coffee when the computers began screaming alerts. The pattern was clearly artificial, clearly from an advanced civilization, and clearly meant for humanity. Within 6 hours, the message was decoded and delivered to the United Nations Emergency Committee in New York. Secretary General Carlos Martinez called an immediate, closed session as linguists worked to translate the alien words. The message was formal and elegant. "Greetings to the heroes of Earth. We are the Galactic Harmony Council, representatives of peaceful civilizations throughout this region of space. An ancient evil has awakened and threatens to destroy all life. We have studied your transmissions and believe your people possess the courage and strength needed to face this darkness. We humbly request that you send your greatest champions to aid us in this desperate hour." Martinez read the translation 3 times before calling for opinions. The room erupted in discussion as diplomats, military officers, and scientists tried to process what they had just heard. "They want heroes," said General Patricia Stone, commander of the UN peacekeeping forces. "That suggests some kind of military action. Or they could mean spiritual leaders," argued Dr. Helen Park from the Cultural Affairs Division. "Many Earth religions speak of heroes in terms of moral courage rather than physical strength." The transmission mentioned studying our broadcasts, noted Intelligence Director Frank Chen. "They know something about human society." Question is what exactly they learned. After 12 hours of debate, they reached a decision. Earth would send a small team of individuals who represented humanity's best qualities: courage, skill, and the ability to help others in dangerous situations. Colonel Jake Morrison was chosen to lead the mission. At 35, he was a veteran who had served in 3 different conflict zones. His service record showed a man who stayed calm under pressure and made good decisions when lives were at stake. He had led rescue operations in earthquake zones and coordinated relief efforts during hurricanes. Dr. Lisa Hayes joined the team as their medical officer. She was a trauma surgeon from Detroit who had worked in war zones and disaster areas around the world. Her specialty was keeping people alive when everything was going wrong. She had performed surgery in collapsed buildings, moving vehicles, and under enemy fire. Tony Rodriguez came from the Los Angeles Fire Department, where he was known for running into situations that other people ran away from. He had pulled survivors from burning skyscrapers, collapsed bridges, and flood zones. His job was to find people in impossible places and bring them out alive. Maya Johnson grew up in Alaska, where she learned that nature was always trying to kill you. She worked for search and rescue, tracking lost hikers in blizzards and finding crashed planes in the wilderness. She could survive for weeks with minimal equipment and navigate. By the stars, when all technology failed, Pete Collins completed the team. He was a former Marine who had become a wilderness survival instructor, taught people how to find food and water in places where both were scarce, how to make shelter from nothing, and how to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. 5 humans spent 2 weeks preparing for a mission they could not fully understand. They packed military equipment, medical supplies, and survival gear. They studied the alien message and tried to guess what they might face. None of them realized. They were about to discover that sometimes the galaxy needs killers more than heroes. The alien ship arrived at Earth 3 days after the UN sent their acceptance message. It appeared in the sky over New York like a floating crystal cathedral, beautiful and impossible. The vessel made no sound as it descended, its surface catching sunlight and throwing rainbows across the city below. Jake Morrison stood on the roof of the UN building with his team, watching the ship settle onto the specially prepared landing pad. He had seen many aircraft in his military career, but nothing like this. The ship looked more like art than technology, all smooth curves and transparent sections that seemed to glow from within. "It's gorgeous," whispered Maya, shading her eyes against the reflected light. "Pretty things can still be dangerous," Pete replied. But his voice held wonder too. A section of the ship's hull became transparent, and a figure appeared inside. The being was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water. As they watched, the creature stepped through the wall as if it were made of mist. "Greetings, heroes of Earth," the being said, its voice like music played on crystal chimes. "I am Captain Velinara of the vessel Harmony's Dream. We are honored by your willingness to aid us." Jake stepped forward and extended his hand. "Colonel Jake Morrison, United States Army. This is my team." Velinara looked at the offered hand with confusion. After a moment, she reached out with one delicate finger and touched Jake's palm. Skin felt cool and smooth, like polished stone. "We should depart immediately," Velinara said, pulling her hand back quickly. "The journey to the Council Station will take 21 of your days." The humans gathered their equipment and followed the alien captain toward her ship. As they approached, Jake noticed that Velinara seemed nervous. Her large eyes kept darting between the team members, and her tentacle-like hair moved restlessly. Around her shoulders, the ship's interior was even more beautiful than its outside. The walls curved like the inside of a seashell, glowing with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The floors felt warm beneath their feet, and the air smelled like ocean spray mixed with flower petals. "Your quarters are prepared," Velinara said, leading them down a corridor that seemed to shift colors as they walked. "We have studied your transmissions to understand your needs." The human quarters were clearly designed by someone who had never met a human. The beds were too soft, shaped like giant lily pads. The bathroom had no door and featured a pool instead of normal facilities. The walls showed images of Earth, but they were all peaceful scenes of meadows and gentle streams. "They think we're nature spirits or something," Tony muttered, poking at his bed with one finger and watching it ripple like water. Over the next few days, the cultural differences became impossible to ignore. The first shock came at dinner time. The ship's dining area was filled with beings from different worlds, all eating what looked like glowing fruits and crystallized air. When Jake asked about protein, Velinara looked confused. "You consume the flesh of other creatures?" she asked, her voice rising with each word. "Well, yes," Jake replied. "Humans are omnivores. We eat plants and animals." Several nearby aliens stopped eating and stared at the humans with horror. One creature that looked like a walking flower began making distressed whistling sounds. Another being covered in soft fur actually fainted and had to be carried away by its companions. "You kill living things to sustain yourselves?" Velinara whispered. "Everything we eat was alive at some point," Lisa explained patiently. "Plants are alive too. How do you think nutrition works?" The revelation that humans were predators spread through the ship within hours. Aliens began avoiding the human quarters, and those who had to interact with them did so nervously. Jake noticed that Velinara now kept her distance during conversations and that several crew members had requested different duty shifts to avoid contact with the humans. The medical examination made things worse. Dr. Hayes had requested to see the ship's medical facilities to better understand alien physiology, but the chief medical officer, a being called Healer Soft Touch, was eager to show off their advanced healing chambers. "We simply place injured beings in the restoration matrix," Soft Touch explained, gesturing to a pod filled with glowing mist. "The healing energy repairs all damage without pain or trauma." "What about surgery?" Lisa asked. "When someone is critically injured, Svethri's feathery crest flattened against its head." "Surgery? You mean deliberately cutting into living flesh?" "Sometimes it's the only way to save a life," Lisa said. "When someone has internal bleeding or damaged organs, you have to operate quickly." The alien healer made a sound like a strangled bird and backed away from Lisa as if she had announced she was carrying plague. "You cut into living beings while they are still alive?" Soft Touch gasped. With anesthesia, Lisa assured him, "They don't feel it." But Soft Touch was already fleeing the medical bay, calling for purification rituals in a high, panicked voice. Word of human medical practices spread even faster than their eating habits. Within a day, most aliens were treating Dr. Hayes like a dangerous savage. The fact that she had saved thousands of lives seemed irrelevant to beings who viewed any form of cutting as barbaric mutilation. Tony's stories about firefighting created another wave of shock. During a casual conversation about their jobs, he mentioned running into burning buildings to rescue people. "You enter locations that are actively trying to kill you?" asked Velinara, her tentacle hair writhing with agitation. "Buildings on fire don't try to kill anyone," Tony explained. "Fire is just a chemical reaction. But yes, we go into dangerous places to save people who are trapped." "Your superiors order you to do this?" "Nobody orders us. We volunteer for it." Velinara spent the rest of the day in her quarters, apparently trying to process the concept of beings who chose to face deadly situations for the sake of strangers. Maya's wilderness. Survival stories were equally disturbing to the alien crew. She described tracking through blizzards, crossing frozen rivers, and spending nights in temperatures that would kill most Earth animals. "Your world attempts to murder you regularly," observed the ship's navigator, a crystalline being called. Bright thought. Yet you explore it voluntarily. Earth isn't trying to murder anyone, Maya laughed. It's just got some challenging environments. Learning to handle them makes you stronger. You seek out suffering to improve yourselves. Maya paused, trying to find words that would make sense to a being whose world was apparently a tropical paradise. We call it building character. Pete's hunting and tracking skills were the final straw. When he casually mentioned following animal tracks and reading signs in the wilderness, several aliens requested emergency counseling sessions with the ship's harmony specialists. You pursue other creatures with the intent to kill them? Velanara asked during what had become a daily cultural briefing session. For food, mostly, Pete replied. Sometimes for pest control. Humans have always been hunters. You enjoy taking life. Pete considered this seriously. I respect the animals I hunt. I use everything and waste nothing. It's part of the natural cycle. But the aliens could not understand the concept of respectful killing. To them, taking any life was monstrous, regardless of the reason or method. By the end of the first week, the humans realized they were not meeting their host's expectations. The aliens had clearly expected something very different when they called for Earth's heroes. They wanted knights in shining armor, Jake said during a private team meeting in their quarters.
Oh.
Noble warriors who fight with honor and save people. Through pure goodness, instead they got a bunch of predators who cut people open and run toward danger, Lisa added. Are we that scary? Maya wondered. Tony thought about aliens fainting when they learned humans ate meat. Apparently, the second week brought news that made everything worse. Long-range sensors detected the Void Seekers approaching the outer colonies. The ancient machines were moving faster than predicted, consuming star systems at an accelerating rate. Jake requested a briefing about the enemy and their capabilities. What he learned made his blood run cold. The Void Seekers were not just destroying civilizations, were erasing them completely, leaving no trace that life had ever existed. The aliens were planning to meet this threat with defensive barriers, peaceful negotiations, and retreat protocols. They spoke of preserving their culture and maintaining their principles even in the face of extinction. They're going to get slaughtered, Pete said quietly after the briefing. Worse, Jake replied. They're going to get erased. The humans looked at each other and understood. The galaxy had called for heroes, but heroes were not what the situation required. The peaceful aliens needed something they had never imagined and could never become. They needed killers. The council station was the most beautiful thing Jake Morrison had ever seen. It hung in space like a giant flower made of light and crystal, with petals that stretched for miles in every direction. Each petal housed a different species, connected by graceful bridges that sparkled with energy fields. Gardens floated in transparent domes, and waterfalls flowed upward in spirals that defied gravity. Incredible, breathed Maya, pressing her face against the viewing port as their ship approached the docking bay. It's like someone built a fairy tale, added Tony, watching schools of luminescent fish swim through the air around the station's outer ring. But Jake noticed something else. There were no defensive weapons anywhere, no shields, no armor plating, no strategic positions. The station was designed purely for beauty and comfort, with no consideration for protection against attack. How do you defend this place? He asked. Velanara, as they prepared to disembark, the alien captain looked confused. Defend. We have harmony fields to prevent accidents and meditation chambers to resolve conflicts. Why would we need defense? Jake exchanged glances with his team. These beings had never faced a real enemy in their entire existence. The docking bay was filled with creatures from 100 different worlds. Some floated like jellyfish made of starlight. Others walked on legs that bent in impossible directions. A few seemed to be made entirely of geometric patterns that shifted and changed as they moved. All of them stopped what they were doing to stare at the humans. Jake felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing. Some aliens backed away as the team passed. Others made sounds that might have been prayers or protective chants. A group of butterfly-like creatures actually fled when Pete smiled and nodded at them. They're afraid of us, Lisa whispered. You blame them? Jake replied, noting how his combat boots sounded harsh against the station's musical floors. The welcoming ceremony took place in the Grand Assembly Chamber. A vast space where representatives from thousands of species gathered. In floating seats that formed patterns like flower petals, the air itself seemed alive, changing colors in response to the emotions of the crowd. Harmonious Ninth waited at the center of the chamber, its crystalline body towering 20 feet above the floor. When it spoke, its voice rang like church bells. Across the assembly, "You welcome the heroes of Earth," the council leader announced. "In our darkest hour, you have answered our call for aid." Polite music played from invisible instruments as Jake and his team were led to a platform that rose. From the floor, he looked out at the assembled beings and felt completely out of place. Everything here was delicate, beautiful, and peaceful. The humans looked like barbarians who had wandered into a palace by mistake. Honored visitors, Harmonious Ninth continued, "We face an ancient evil that threatens all life in our galaxy. The Void Seekers have awakened from their long sleep and begun consuming our worlds. We need champions who can help us find a way to stop them." Jake stepped forward. "We'll need complete information about the enemy, their capabilities, their weaknesses, their tactics." A being that looked like a living tree covered in silver leaves drifted forward. "I am General Softwing, military advisor to the council. Perhaps I can answer your questions." Jake almost laughed. A military advisor who called himself Softwing and looked like he would blow away in a strong breeze. But he kept his expression neutral and professional. "Show us what we're facing," he said. The chamber filled with holographic images of the Void Seekers. Machines were massive, each one the size of a moon. They moved through space in perfect formations, surrounded by smaller craft that swarmed. Like mechanical insects, where they passed, star systems simply vanished, leaving empty space behind. "They consume all matter and energy," General Softwing explained in a voice like rustling leaves. "Planets, stars, even space dust. Nothing remains after their passage." "How do you fight them?" asked Pete. "We establish defensive perimeters using Harmony shields," the general replied. "When that fails, we attempt communication through our peace ambassadors. If peaceful contact proves impossible, we implement strategic withdrawal to preserve our populations." Jake stared at the alien general in disbelief. "You try to negotiate with machines that eat entire solar systems? All conflicts can be resolved through understanding and compassion," General Softwing said with complete conviction. Lisa leaned forward. "What about casualties? How many people have you lost?" A wave of distress rippled through the assembly. Several beings began making sounds that Jake recognized as expressions of grief and horror. "We do not speak of such things," Harmonious Ninth said, its crystal form dimming. "The concept of beings ceasing to exist is too painful to discuss." "But you must have medical facilities," Lisa pressed. "Emergency treatment for the injured."
"Our
"Healing chambers can repair most damage," replied a graceful being that seemed to be made of flowing water. "But we have never faced injuries of the type you describe. Our species evolved beyond the need for primitive trauma response." Maya raised her hand. "What about evacuation procedures? How do you move large populations away from danger?" Send. "Polite requests for citizens to relocate to safer areas," answered a creature that looked like a walking flower. "Most comply within several months. Once consensus is reached through community discussion," Tony's jaw dropped. "Months.
is
You only have ours?" "Such urgency would create panic and disharmony," the flower being explained. "We prefer gradual transitions that maintain social stability." Jake felt a cold not forming in his stomach. These aliens were facing an enemy that could destroy worlds in minutes, and their response was to form committees and hold discussions. "You gathered intelligence on the enemy?" he asked. "Studied their technology, looked for weaknesses." General Softwing's leaves rustled with what might have been confusion. "We observe from a respectful distance and hope they will eventually communicate their intentions." "You don't actively scout them or try to capture their technology?" "Such aggressive actions would violate the Harmony Accords," the general replied. "We must not become like the forces we oppose." Pete spoke up, his voice carefully controlled. "So you fight machines that eat planets by being polite and hoping they'll go away?" "We maintain our principles," Harmonious Ninth declared, its voice ringing with pride. Even in the face of extinction, we will not abandon what makes us civilized. Jake looked around the chamber at thousands of beautiful, peaceful beings who had never learned to fight for their lives. They had built paradise worlds where conflict was impossible and suffering was unknown. They had created the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, and they were all going to die. During the break in the session, Jake gathered his team in a private conference room. The space was designed for meditation, with soft lighting and walls. That displayed calming nature scenes from various worlds. "They're helpless," Maya said quietly. "Worse than helpless," Tony replied. "They don't even understand what they're facing." Lisa shook her head. "I've seen disaster victims with more survival instinct. At least humans panic and run when something tries to kill them." "These people evolved on paradise worlds," Pete observed. "No predators, no natural disasters, no resource scarcity. They never learned to fight because they never had to." Jake stared out a window at the beautiful station around them. Gardens floated in the void, maintained by technology that could reshape matter itself. Art installations the size of cities drifted between the station's arms. It was the most peaceful, perfect place he had ever seen. It was also completely defenseless. "They called for heroes," he said finally. "Noble champions who would save them without requiring them to change. They wanted someone else to do the ugly work while they stayed." "Pure, can we do it?" asked Maya. 5 humans against machines that eat solar systems? Jake thought about the Void Seekers' formation patterns, their systematic approach to consumption, their apparent lack of defensive measures against small targets. His mind automatically began analyzing attack vectors and identifying potential weaknesses. "Maybe," he said, "but not by being heroes." Lisa understood first. "They want heroes. They need soldiers. They need killers," Jake corrected. "They need people who can do terrible things to stop something worse from happening." Pete nodded grimly. "They need Deathworlders." Outside the window, another urgent message arrived from the outer colonies. The Void Seekers had accelerated their advance. 3 more star systems had gone dark in the past day. Time was running out, and the galaxy's most peaceful civilizations were about to learn what it meant to survive. The alarms began screaming at dawn. Jake Morrison was pulled from sleep by a sound he had never heard before, like crystal wind chimes being shattered by hurricane winds. Emergency lights bathed the station in pulsing red, and he could hear thousands of alien voices raised in panic throughout the massive structure. He grabbed his equipment and ran toward the command center, his team falling in behind him. The corridors were filled with fleeing aliens, many of them floating or flying in patterns that made no tactical sense. They moved like civilians in a disaster, which Jake realized was exactly what they were. The command center was chaos. Beings from dozens of species crowded around holographic displays showing star maps with expanding dark zones. Jake pushed through the crowd and found Harmonious Ninth at the central console, its crystalline body flickering with distressed light patterns. "What's the situation?" Jake demanded. "The Outer Rim colonies," the council leader replied, its voice cracking like breaking glass. 5 star systems went dark in the last 6 hours. The Void Seekers are moving faster than our calculations predicted. Jake studied the tactical display. The enemy advance was not random. The machines were following shipping lanes and communication networks, taking out infrastructure first to blind and isolate their targets. "Where are your defensive fleets?" he asked. General Softwing drifted over, his silver leaves trembling. "We dispatched 3 Harmony squadrons to establish protective barriers around the threatened systems. We have lost all contact with them." Jake felt cold understanding wash over him. The aliens had sent their equivalent of police officers to face an invasion force. It would have been like sending crossing guards to stop an army of tanks. "We need to evacuate the remaining colonies immediately," he said. "Impossible," replied a flower-like being Jake recognized as the evacuation coordinator. "Proper relocation procedures require months of preparation. We must maintain social harmony during the transition process." "There is no time for harmony," Jake snapped. "Those people have hours before the machines reach them." The alien coordinator recoiled as if Jake had struck it. We cannot simply order beings to abandon their homes. Such trauma would violate everything we believe. Around the command center and saw the same pattern everywhere. Aliens debating proper procedures while their worlds died. Committees forming to discuss evacuation protocols that would take weeks to implement. Peace negotiators preparing messages for machines that had no interest in communication. "You're all going to die," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. The command center fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes turned toward Jake, and he saw fear, confusion, and desperate hope in their faces. "The Void Seekers are not an enemy you can negotiate with or hide from," Jake continued. "They are machines programmed to consume everything. They have no emotions, no mercy, and no interest in your principles. The only way to stop them is to destroy them completely." Harmonious Ninth's form brightened with what might have been anger. "We will not abandon our civilized values to become like the forces we oppose." "Then you will become extinct," Jake replied bluntly. "Your choice." He turned to his team. "We do this our way or we don't do it at all." Dr. Lisa Hayes stepped forward. "I need access to your medical facilities and a list of species physiologies. If we're going to fight, people are going to get hurt, and your healing chambers won't be enough for combat injuries." Tony Rodriguez moved to the evacuation displays. "I'm taking over emergency protocols. Anyone who wants to live follows my orders. Without discussion, anyone who wants to debate can stay here and explain their principles to the machines." Maya Johnson was already studying the sensor readings. "I need scout ships and volunteers willing to get close to the enemy. We have to gather intelligence on their movement patterns and weaknesses." Pete Collins examined the station's layout. "This place is a death trap. It's no defensive positions, no escape routes, no way to fight from cover. We need to teach these people basic survival skills before they all get killed." The aliens stared at the humans in shock. Several beings began protesting that such aggressive actions violated their most sacred beliefs. Others argued that becoming violent would make them no better than the machines they fought. Jake let them talk for exactly 30 seconds. Then he walked to the main communication console and opened a channel to every ship and station in the system. "This is Colonel Jake Morrison of Earth," he announced, his voice carrying 2 million of beings across dozens of worlds. "The Void Seekers will reach this system in approximately 18 hours. Anyone who wants to survive will follow human instructions exactly and immediately. Anyone who prefers to maintain their principles can stay and die with honor." The response was immediate. Hundreds of ships began requesting evacuation orders. Thousands of beings volunteered for emergency duties they did not understand. Even some council members stepped forward, their survival instincts finally overriding their cultural programming. But others refused. Entire species declared they would rather face extinction than abandon their peaceful ways. Harmonious Ninth led this group, its crystalline form radiating stubborn dignity. "We will not become monsters to fight monsters," the council leader announced. Looked at the beautiful being and felt genuine sadness. "Then you'll die as angels." "I respect that choice, but I won't let everyone else die with you." The next hours were controlled chaos, as humans taught aliens how to survive. Lisa set up field hospitals and trained medical personnel to perform emergency surgery without healing chambers. Her students fainted regularly, but those who stayed learned to save lives under impossible conditions. Tony organized the greatest evacuation in galactic history. He ignored protests about proper procedures and social harmony, loading ships far beyond safe capacity and sending them to distant systems. His method saved millions of lives and traumatized an entire civilization that had never faced urgent decisions. Maya led reconnaissance missions into Void Seeker territory. Using her wilderness skills to track and study the machines, she discovered their weaknesses by accident when her scout ship lost power and drifted undetected past their sensors. The machines ignored anything that appeared to be dead space debris. Pete trained volunteer fighters using techniques that would have been considered war crimes by council standards. He taught them to hide, to ambush, to sacrifice some positions to save others. Most of his students broke down crying, but a few developed the hard edge needed for survival. The breakthrough came when Jake led a suicide mission into the heart of a Void Seeker formation, using Maya's intelligence about their sensor blind spots. His team disguised their ship as wreckage and drifted close enough to plant explosives in a command node. The mission succeeded, but the cost was terrible. Half of Jake's volunteer squad died in the attack, including several aliens who had overcome 1,000,000 years of peaceful evolution to become warriors. The survivors returned to the station changed forever, carrying the weight of necessary violence. When the explosives detonated, the entire Void Seeker fleet stopped moving. Without their central coordination, the machines became confused and vulnerable. Human-trained strike teams attacked from multiple directions, using guerrilla tactics the aliens had never imagined. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Void Seeker threat was eliminated, but so was the galaxy as it had existed. Peaceful species had learned to kill. Civilized beings had discovered the necessity of violence. Paradise worlds had become training grounds for soldiers. Jake stood in the command center, now scarred by battle damage and filled with memorial flowers for the dead. Harmonious Ninth approached him, its crystalline form dimmed with grief. "We called for heroes," the council leader said quietly. "We wanted champions who would save us without changing us." "Heroes don't exist," Jake replied. "Just people who do what needs to be done when everything goes wrong. The galaxy will never be the same." Jake looked out at the surviving ships, filled with beings who now knew the price of survival. "No, it won't, but it will be alive." 3 months later, the human team returned to Earth. They had saved billions of lives by teaching peaceful civilizations how to become killers. They had preserved the galaxy by destroying its innocence. The aliens honored them as saviors, but also feared them as the beings who had shown them the darkness in their own souls. Jake's final report to Earth was simple. Sometimes survival requires becoming something you never wanted to be. The galaxy had called for heroes. Earth had sent Deathworlders instead. And in the end, that had made all the difference.